Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to an NC3T webinar, our first in a brown bag series. This is a webinar about creating partnerships, and we're so proud to have Brett speaking with us today since he literally wrote a book on this subject. So Brett, welcome. You've got a good crowd here. We would ask that you please type any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll try to address those at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. And good afternoon, everybody. This is Brett Pulowski, Executive Vice President with the National Center for College and Career Transitions. I'll reaffirm what Kathy said. We do have a large crowd today, and we are trying to keep this webinar to 45 minutes. So if you do have questions, we will address those at the end of the session, just to make sure we have enough time to get through the content. If we don't have time to get to your question, you can always reach out to us later. So I want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about NC3T. NC3T, which is the National Center for College and Career Transitions, was launched a few years ago by Hans Meanert and myself. Hans's expertise is very wide-ranging, from career and technical education, college career pathways, STEM education. I've been much more concentrated, focused on business education partnerships, but we shared sort of a vision for preparing students to succeed and be fully contributing members of their communities. And that was sort of the underlying vision for the launch of NC3T. We have a twofold mission, which is that we want to see every team with a dream and a plan, and we want every community to have a capable and ready workforce. And we do that in a couple of ways. One is through coaching and consulting services, and in fact we're working with several communities, primarily in the Northeast, on something called the Pathways Innovation Network, where we're helping to coach them into sort of a wall-to-wall college career pathways model for their school districts. Another is by providing resources and other sorts of expertise, such as books, workshops. We're actually working with the Association for Career and Technical Education on a new resource called the CTE Clinic, and there will be several products rolled out and services this year focused on CTE program quality. Just a couple of the books that we have available. One is the STEM Leader Guide, which Hans wrote. It's available on Amazon. Building Advisory Boards That Matter is a book that we wrote together. And in fact, it was the first project that we had together. It was done at the request of ACTE, and it's available on their website. Our newest resource is a book that I co-authored with a fellow named Charlie Katz, who has great experience in business education partnerships. He comes from the National Academy Foundation, where he was the Director of Business Engagement. So it was wonderful to work with Charlie on this, and it really is sort of a soup-to-nuts toolkit for how to develop strong and sustainable business education partnerships. And a lot of the content for today's webinar is actually found in that book, or sort of reflects the content of that book. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I'd like to start today by sharing the story of a survey that took place last year. It's actually not an education story. It's not a college career preparedness story. It's the story of a company called VoucherCloud. And they do online coupons, rebates, that sort of thing. You just go look for discounts and print off the coupons. And last year, they were starting to get a bit more technically savvy. They were starting to do online rebates. They were starting to port coupons to people's mobile phones. And they wanted to get a sense of the sophistication of their user base. So they did a survey, and they wanted to see how sophisticated the audience was, whether they knew a lot of the common technology terms. And they were sort of sneaky about it. They did a general interest survey where they had several questions about tech terms, but they were sort of hidden in between sort of general knowledge terms, who's the Secretary of State, things like that. And so they asked about a lot of terms that most of the people on the phone probably are familiar with. Most people probably know what a motherboard is, what an MP3 is, what HTML is. What they found is that people don't know acronyms and jargon like we think they do. they found 42% of people thought a motherboard was the deck of a cruise ship. They thought MP3 was a Star Wars robot. One of my favorites, it's not even on here, is that 11% of people thought that Blu-ray was a jazz musician from the 1930s, which Blu-ray to me is the coolest name I've ever heard. But so they found that people don't know the terms, that we just sort of assume that they do. Another example of this issue is also found in texting on your phones. This here is an example of an older person who thought LOL stood for lots of love. So your great aunt just passed away, LOL. And that's actually fairly common. There are a lot of examples of this where people just don't know the technology and the terminology like we expect they do. And the reason that I bring this up is that education is probably one of the most acronym-filled and jargon-filled fields that I've ever been involved in. I mean, we've got, STEM and IEP and ESLs and Carnegie units and differentiated instruction. We've got all these terms and acronyms. And usually when we're talking amongst ourselves, we know what we're talking about. But when we go out and we talk to the public, they may not know the things that we sort of assume they do. And I think that that's true for the idea of college and career preparedness. I think that it's another term that may not have the universal understanding that we think it does. And in fact, I think really with college career preparedness, I think that schools have a very solid sense and a very usually official definition of what college preparedness is. And I think that's probably less so for career preparedness. I think it's a much sort of softer, squishier definition. It may not be as formal. And so we'd actually like to do a survey now. Candace and Kathy, if you could help me post the survey. Okay, so we've got a poll open on the little panel to your right. We want to find out, first of all, if your state has an official definition of college career preparedness. And again, not just the college preparedness, but the career preparedness.
We have about 50% of the people have voted, Brett, and so far it looks like our yes would be the, well, we're getting close to it. I'm going to close the poll. We're at 80%. I'm going to close the poll in just about 3 seconds, and then I'll share it with you.
Great.
Yeah, so right now we have a majority of yes. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. If you didn't get a chance to vote, there's another one coming up. But we do have almost 90% of the people. So let me close that and show you the results. Can you see those results?
I cannot see them, but that doesn't mean that everybody else can't see them.
Okay. I can see them, so I'm hoping they can. Candace, let us know if you can. I'll say them. Does your state have a definition for college career preparedness? Yes, 51%. No, 10%. And I don't know, 39%.
Which is really interesting because I asked this question in November at the ACTE conference, and almost no one in the room, and I don't know if there was some sort of selection bias, but almost no one said that their state had a solid definition of college career preparedness. So let's go ahead and ask go ahead.
Well, okay, let's do the next poll, but I'm seeing you, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint any longer, but that might just be how I have things layered. But let me go ahead and launch the next poll.
Okay, and this is a similar but a different question in that we want to find out if you have a living definition. And in other words, your state may have a definition on a book somewhere. But when we ask if you've got a living definition, that it would be a definition that you're fluent with, that your teachers and others in the building are fluent with, that your partners understand, and really there's an explicit common understanding of what it means in your school or in your district.
Well, we have about 50% of the votes in, and I don't think you're going to be surprised by the results, Brett. But let's just give it another couple seconds. I And again, nothing's changing, so I don't think you'll be surprised. Okay, we have a great majority of people registering their votes, so I'm going to close that, and I will share the results. And Brett, well, what a nice clean number. So do you have a living definition? Yes, 20%. No, 80%.
Excellent. Well, 20% is a good start. It's a good place to build.
It is.
Okay, so
I'm going to hide those results. Brett, I just want to say you might have to, let me just see, I'm not seeing your PowerPoint any longer. I don't know if you have to relaunch that. Ken, just let us know if you can see the PowerPoint or if you see the, yeah, she can't see the PowerPoint either, so you might have to just refresh what's on your desktop there or pull your PowerPoint back up.
Right, okay, so yeah, I'm not quite sure how to relaunch. Maybe we pause and then, can you see it now?
I can't. This is funny. We were just talking about this. I'll do the stretch. I'll do a little chatting while you work on that. But just before this call, Brett was telling us a story about the first webinar he ever did and how he lost his screen a few minutes into it. So I don't know, Brett. I'm becoming suspicious.
Let's try this. And apologies to all attendees. We're sort of trying to fix this on the fly. I'm going to try to pass the presentation off to somebody else, and maybe they can pass it back, and that might refresh the screen.
Okay, so, let's get Ken. I think Candace has the version.
Okay.
I hope we're not putting you on the spot, Candace.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job, Candace. Thank you.
Good. Can you try to pass it back to me, and we'll see if it works.
It's a good opportunity for everyone to open their sandwich and open their chips and get their lunch going.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
I can. And you are back on the poll page. Good. Now I see it on defining our terms. Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well,
thanks,
apologies
everyone.
Again to all who will bear with us. But just to reaffirm the poll, we had 20% who do feel they have a living definition of college career preparedness, 80% who don't. And as we talk about bringing in partners to boost college career preparedness, the first question is, if you can't define it, how can you ask people to help you with it? If you don't have a target, how can you tell people what you're trying to achieve and figure out a way to get there? So the first job is obviously to develop that shared definition. And if we were in more of an interactive environment, we could do a little bit of activity to talk about the components. I'm going to save you that step given time and logistics issues, and just offer you an example of how one district tackled this challenge. For those of you who are familiar with college career academies, Nashville is one of the largest and most successful in the country. And in addition to all the pathways work they did, they worked with their community to come up with a definition of a successful graduate. And I think it does truly encompass both the college and the career preparedness aspects. So their definition, I'll just go through these briefly. One is to have a living plan for post-secondary education and career. They want a 21 composite on the ACT, which speaks directly to that college preparedness piece. They want every student to have had a work-based experience, service learning, or a capstone research project, at least one course completed online, and they want every student to graduate with college credit or nationally recognized professional certification. So these are their 5 goals for every student graduating from their academies. And there are 3 great things about those goals. One, first, is that they're defined in collaboration with the community. They came together to come up with a shared definition. The second, and it took me a while to sort of come to this realization, but when we talk about college career preparedness, a lot of times we talk about things that are very hard to measure, like digital literacy or initiative or things like that. And they came up with some very easy ways, some very easy things to do that measured some very hard things to measure. And we'll go back, and if you think about the work-based experience, for example, we want every student to have some workplace exposure. We want them to have that initiative, to have those communication skills, collaborative skills, things like that. We assume that they get those through that work-based experience. We want every student to have digital literacy, and that can be a hard thing to measure, but if we know that every student has taken at least one course online, we can assume that they've gotten some of that. So I think it's a very smart way to measure some very hard to measure things. And the third piece is that most of these are independently assessed. There's sort of a running strand between education and business in that business doesn't always trust the measurements or the validity of the outcomes that educators present. And so if you've got an independent assessment, whether that's the ACT or college credits for classes or things like that, those are third-party assessments of those outcomes, which is very important to your business partners. So the first thing that we want to do in working with our business partners is develop that shared definition, that living definition of college career readiness. And there we want to identify the areas that we want to focus on, like tech skills or soft skills or things like that. And we also want to determine the outcomes, in other words, how those things are measured through experiences or certifications or things like that. Now, I did a survey of business coalition leaders back in 2007 on their partnership practices, and I actually asked them a few questions that are directly relevant to this issue. And the first is, what type of partnership outcomes are of particular interest to you? And these are economic development corporations, their chambers of commerce, people like that. Workforce preparedness, far and away their most important outcome. I also asked them what it is that they want to provide to the educational process. Providing expertise is, again, far and away their top area of preferred support. So when we talk about engaging partners to come up with a definition of college career preparedness, this is absolutely in their sweet spot. I mean, they want to provide that expertise. They want to focus on workplace readiness. This is exactly the sort of thing that they want us to be asking. So before we talk about how to partner, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about why partner. Because one of my operating assumptions always is that people are really busy. And I know that partnership work can be time-consuming. So the first question that I think everybody asks is it worthwhile to engage business partners or other community members in this sort of work? And so I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about that. So there are a lot of challenges in education, proficiency rates, getting kids to graduation, things like that. One of the root challenges in education is engagement and interest, and making sure the kids are sort of bought into the process and fully involved. And the Gallup student poll shows that over time, kids be engaged in education. Well, business partners, that's one of the first things that they can address. There was a survey done by the Gates Foundation of dropouts, high school dropouts. They actually went and asked, well, what is it that would have kept you in school? And 81% of the survey respondents of these dropouts said if the school had provided opportunities for real-world learning, it would have improved the chances of them graduating from school. So that by itself, I think, shows the value of business engagement, that there's actually much more. And if you want to look at the research base, one of the best places to look is in the Career Academy area. And that's for a couple reasons. First of all, because partnerships with the business community are a core element of career academies. Another reason is that just from a research point of view, it's a great source of data because a lot of these schools operate on a lottery model. You've got that random assignment piece. A lot of students try to get in. Some do and some don't. You can track both groups that are similar groups and see the difference in outcomes. So it's a great source of data. And the data, various people have looked at this, CASN, MDRC, some other organizations, and they found that there are a lot of improved outcomes that come from working in a career academy or a partnership environment. In school, you see a lot of outcomes in terms of improved attendance, more credits, retention, increased graduation rates, things like that. You also see improved outcomes in the area of after-school outcomes like earnings or post-secondary achievement, things like that. One of the ones that really sort of floored me is that students who were involved in career academies earned more than non-academy students after they graduated. For males, nearly $30,000 more over 8 years, which is just a phenomenal number to me. Another example showing the impact of partnerships, the California Partnership Academies. There are around 400 in California, and by law, at least half of the students in the academies must have high-risk characteristics. And they found that these students were 10% more likely to graduate, and that they were much more likely to meet the course requirements for admission to the University of California than students who were not in the academy environment. And this shows the difference in graduation rates, and any larger network of academies has similar data. I don't have the actual outcomes for the National Academy Foundation, but I believe that their graduation rates are around 10% higher than students not in an academy environment. There's another great report that comes out of a group in London called the Education and Employers Task Force. They had a report called What is to be Gained Through Partnership, and they did sort of a meta survey to look at all the research and compile it in a single source. So that's a great resource to look at, is this What is to be Gained Through Partnership document. And they showed a myriad of benefits from business engagement working with students. And if you look at the NC3T website, there's a good compilation piece. The focus is on college career pathways, but there is, by necessity, a lot of good partnership-specific data. So if you're looking for a single source, a good readable document, go to the NC3T website, scroll down to the bottom, and you will find a link for this research summary, the case for college and career pathways. And now, how to partner. So if we know that we have to have that definition, obviously the definition is the first thing that we need to look at. And we know that partnerships have an impact on students. Now we have to talk about what are the ways that businesses can work with schools and districts to improve student outcomes and to boost college career preparedness. In our book, the Employer Engagement Toolkit, we identified 9 primary partnership models, ways that businesses can work with schools and work with districts. Now, some of these are more relevant to college career preparedness than others. And we're going to work with these assumptions that we're looking at some common areas of focus, like academic proficiency, achieving certifications or college credits, and we want to boost students' soft skills. We want to give them some work experience, so some real-world experiences, and we want them to walk out with some career awareness, if not a living career plan, college career plan. If we take those assumptions, the first 6 models identified in the toolkit, I think, are the most appropriate for this discussion. Not to say that the others don't have value, they all have value, but in the areas of boosting college career preparedness outcomes for students, it's these first 6 that are really sort of what I would focus on. Now, advisory boards, I don't know what percentage of the people on the phone are career and technical education folks, but advisory boards and CTE are a cornerstone element of any program. And to me, it's really the single most powerful partnership model that is out there. If you think back to that survey done in 2007, it taps into the expertise of the business community. It focuses on workforce preparedness. It's a great place to engage the business community because they want to be heard, and they want to be sure that the work happening in the schools is relevant to the workplace. They want to be sure students are prepared for a real-world environment when they come out. And there's a few ways that advisory boards do this. First, they serve as the keepers of the flame, in a sense. They make sure that the program has fidelity to what it is that they're trying to accomplish, that it's relevant to what's happening in the real world, that we're providing students with an opportunity to prepare as best they can for what they'll find once they graduate. It's a great opportunity to look at what is taught, curriculum standards, area of focus, things like that, to ensure that we've got good program quality and good relevance. Advisory board members, if you pick the right board members, you're going to find people who are well connected in the community and people who can bring in additional resources from outside to set up mentoring and to set up job shadows and things like that. So it's a great opportunity for these people to invest a little bit of time, produce tremendous results if the advisory board is run well. A second area is directly focused on expertise. It's focused on tapping into the knowledge and skills and experience that those business partners have that they want to share. They can come in and talk to you about current industry standards. They can talk about state-of-the-art equipment. They can tell you and your students where they expect their industry and certain professions to be going in the future, which gives you a great opportunity not only to shape your program, but also to give students that live feedback and help them sort of guide their own plans going forward. Business people love to come in and offer guest instruction, talk about the work that they do, talk about their jobs, talk about their industries. There are other opportunities when you start to think about expertise, such as skills-based volunteering, where it's not just a matter of business partners working with students, but business partners can come in and support your program overall, or support your school overall. There's some great examples out there of people actually coming in and serving as consultants to a district to find ways to generate cost savings with funds being redirected into instruction. Deloitte had a great program where they lent a national nonprofit focused on college access a whole team of IT people to completely redo their data systems. So expertise with students and with program design is great, but I wouldn't limit my focus there because there's a lot of ways to tap in to the expertise that your partners can provide. Mentors, another very, very solid area. There's a great research base proving the value of mentoring, and mentoring can be structured in a myriad of ways. You can have short-term, you can have long-term, people can meet weekly, monthly, you can focus on academic outcomes or social outcomes, career outcomes, but there's really just a lot of evidence showing the impact of mentoring. And it's something that the students get a lot out of, but it's something that the adults get a lot out of as well. And as you're thinking about mentoring, I wouldn't just think about the students. There are some programs out there focused on adult mentoring, where CEOs will serve as maybe a mentor for 3 years for a new principal to help them sort of get a handle on establishing culture and focusing on change initiatives and things like that. So it's another great area that I would consider. Real-world challenges, I mean, this really is sort of in the wheelhouse of career and technical education. There's a lot of different ways to engage students in real-world challenges. There's some competitions out there that put out a realistic challenge for competition purposes, like the first robotics competitions. There are all sorts of CTE programs out there that, particularly in construction, where they will build a house and sell the house to fund the next year's program. I was at the ABC conference last year, as the Association for Builders and Contractors. I was talking to one of their field reps, and they were saying, well, we don't have the resources to build and sell a house every year, so we do dog houses. And they actually bring, rather than having to go off to a job site, they bring industry professionals to the school to build dog houses, which is much easier in terms of OSHA requirements. It's a much more challenging task for people to take on, and it's still a good fundraiser for them. One of the best stories I heard in this area came, again, out of the academies of Nashville. At Glencliff High School, one of their primary corporate partners is Dialysis Clinics Incorporated, and they obviously offer dialysis service to people with diabetes. One of the challenges that people with diabetes face is that the diet can be awfully bland. And they found a lot of people complaining about the snacks when they came in for dialysis. And so dialysis clinics came to the culinary program at Glencliff, and they said, we have a problem. We want you guys to solve it. We want you to come up with tasty snacks that meet the diabetic guidelines. So the students had a complete project. They went and they interviewed patients. They went back to their kitchen and came up with a bunch of different recipes to test out. They did focus groups. They sort of narrowed down the snacks that got the best response and still met guidelines. They actually gave a presentation to the leadership of the company. And the company is actually offering those snacks now in their dialysis centers. So that's a great example of a real-world challenge, and I think that those are really only limited by your imagination. I think if you apply yourself and work with your partners, you can find some really important work that students can offer for your business partners. Student work-based learning, again, right there in the core of what career and technical education is and what college career pathways models do. There's an interesting distinction, and maybe the folks in CTE are very familiar with this. This was sort of a new concept for me. It came from Charlie Katz that I wrote the book with. There's a difference between work-based learning and work-placed learning. Work-placed learning, like job shadowing or internships or things like that, are relatively higher level and can be a bit more challenging to put together. But work-based learning is just really sort of business-focused activities that students can do on campus with business partners. An example would be to have a career fair or a college fair, or to set up mock interviews, or to write a resume, or things like that. Those are all real-world activities, and they're all work-based, and they're things that your partners can help you with. But it's not necessarily something that you've got to get everybody on a bus and take them 30 minutes away to an off-site facility. Teacher learning experiences would be the last one that I would focus on as part of this series of 6. And I think the ROI, the return on investment, from teacher learning experiences is phenomenal. I think if you reach one student with a partnership model, you've reached one student. If you reach one teacher, you have the potential to reach hundreds of students over the course of several years. So I think you can have a tremendous impact on the quality of education if you embrace the teacher learning experience, make sure that they have access to what's actually happening in the workplace, allow them to become comfortable with the content, to develop relationships with people in industry. I did some work in financial literacy several years ago, and there was a real challenge in getting financial literacy into schools. And they actually did a survey to find out why that was. The top reason was the teachers were not comfortable with the financial literacy content. They didn't feel that they had mastered it themselves, so they weren't comfortable presenting it to students. So I think the idea of allowing teachers to really dive in and understand industry firsthand is tremendously powerful. So I'll go back and just sort of rehash the idea that before we can do any of that, we have to come up with a definition of what college career readiness is. And it's not something that we can do internal to a CTE program or to a school or to a district. It's a definition. If you want your partners to buy into the work you're doing, it's a definition that you need to come up with them, hand in hand. It really allows them to feel bought in. It brings you some real-world relevance to what that definition is, and ultimately it is a great way to prepare students for the real world. One point I would make is it's great if you can get a solid definition at the state level, but even if you're only able to focus, like even if your purview is only a single program or a department or a single school, if you can come up with your partners a definition of college career readiness as it relates to the area that you can influence, you're still way ahead of the game. And so with that, I think we can open it up for questions, and I'm going to let Kathy handle the administration of the questions, and if we have any, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Brett. I'm looking now in the question box if anyone, and again, it is a large group, so maybe that's, don't feel you should not ask a question. We do have a couple minutes, so please feel free to type in any question, and Candace and I will monitor that. While people are typing their questions in, Brett, would you like to go to the next slide just so we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. I would like to just announce that our webinar series will continue next month, February 18th, as you can see on your screen, at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. You can register on our website, nc3t.com. And next month we'll be talking about key components in developing a pathway system with Hans Meter. And like Brett, Hans has really a great amount of experience in this and has developed some very systematic approaches to pathways. So obviously in 45 minutes it will be somewhat of an overview, but I think you'll enjoy it. So please do register. And I don't show any questions. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong box here. Okay, I do have one for you, Brett. How do I approach businesses to get them interested in this discussion? How do I make that contact or reach out?
Sure. I think that there are a few things that I would do. If you've got an advisory board, if you're part of a career technical education program, I would start with your advisory board. Those people either should be helping you with a definition or they should be helping you identify the people who should be at the table to have that discussion. If you don't have an advisory board, I would start with your current contacts. I would go talk to any existing volunteers who are already involved in your work. I would look to see who I already know in the community, who should help guide me to who I should be talking to. If that doesn't work, or if you need to supplement that, the next place I would go would be to your business coalitions. So go to the Chamber of Commerce, go to your WIB, your Workforce Investment Board, go to your EDC, your Economic Development Corporation, go to any industry trade groups, go to any professional unions in this area. Those are the people who will, again, be able to help you identify the right people to be at the table, and that they're going to share an interest in this. They'll probably want to see it at the table too, and I think that as a business coalition, they can provide a tremendous voice into that discussion.
Brett, I'm going to move on because there now are a lot of questions. So let me address several questions right off the bat. Yes, this webinar will be available. The recording will be posted on the NC3T website as of this Friday. Brett, there is some question. Will the PowerPoint be available? Do you know if you're putting that on the website?
We certainly can. I'm happy to share that. And I know that we've got an email going out as a follow-up. I don't know if we can provide a link to that.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. So if you're on the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email, and we'll try to either put the PowerPoint in that or direct you to where we have it, and the recording will be on the website on Friday. I'm going to tell you just a couple of questions, Brett, and then you dive in here. I understand the value of measurable assessments, but I'm not always certain that the academic performance as measured by the ACT is reflective of skills in the workplace. More of a comment than a question, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I'm not a deep expert in relevance of ACT. I know that they have actually done some research. And if you go to ACT.org, they've got a research section. And they've actually looked at workplace skills versus academic skills and whether proficiency in one relates to proficiency in the other. So in other words, if you've got certain academic skills, do those transfer to workplace preparedness? And there is some overlap. Now, I can't speak to the ACT test any more than the SAT or anybody like that. If we're talking specifically workplace skills, I'd probably still look at professional certifications or work keys or things like that. But I think the ACT piece in the Nashville example is more focused on the academic preparedness than the workplace preparedness.
Thank you. I work at ACT. We have the National Career Readiness Certificate that looks at foundational workplace skills. Thank you, Chris.
That's good.
Thanks for sharing that. The National Career Readiness Certificate looks at foundational skills at ACT. Brett, we have a request if you could speak a little bit more on the 9 models, and then a question, how does this concept improve 9th grade retention? And we are looking at about 3 minutes left, Brett.
Okay. I'm scrolling back to the 9 models, and I'm trying to think if we've got that anywhere else on our website. Each of those is covered separately in the Employer Engagement Toolkit. I don't think we've got this in any more detail outside of that resource.
Let me jump in, Brett, and say that the toolkit that you're referring to, that Brett is a co-author of, is available at our website. I was in Nashville with Brett when he presented this at the ACTE conference recently. We had a booth, and I can't tell you how many people came to our booth after that session when Brett wasn't there and said how much they valued your session, Brett, and that they looked through the book there and were purchasing it. So it's more of a toolkit. It will help you go through some thinking, reflection, and also roll up your sleeves and get some work done with your team. And that book is available on the website. However, it's sold out, so we're printing new copies and expect them next week. So if you would like to get a copy of that, please go to the website and order that. And the last question I think we're going to have time for is how does this improve 9th grade retention?
Yeah, I think that this is extremely relevant to 9th grade retention. If you look at what the research says, students as young as 5th grade can start to think about careers. They're mentally prepared to start thinking about business opportunities, things like that. And it does seem that a lot of schools start their career focus in 10th grade. It's much more of a high school activity. But you see a fair amount of career exploration work taking place at the middle school level. And I think, again, it really comes down to that engagement and retention piece. So if you're showing kids the relevance of what it is that they're learning, that sort of cliched question, when am I ever going to use this? I think if you can make the content relevant, if you can show them the real-world applications of what they're learning, and that's something that your business partners are ideally suited to help with. So I do think that working with partners at the middle school level, at the early high school level, will help with engagement and relevance and things like that. So I think that will speak directly to retention.
Hey, Brett, you know I'm the taskmaster, and it is 1:45 by my clock, so we want to thank everyone for joining us today and invite you to visit the website where you can look at the research document that's obviously available to you at no cost, and also order the book that goes in more deeply to these 9 models and other things that Brett talked about today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to register for our next webinar, which can also be done on the website. Brett, thank you very much. Great information, and I think 45 minutes was the perfect amount of time to just kind of give an overview, and I'm happy to report you kept everyone in the, we can tell, audience, when you're not paying attention or when you stop looking at our screen, and everybody was pretty much involved. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again, or talking to you again, next month for the next Brown Bag webinar series through NC3T. Thanks everyone, and have a good afternoon.